Welcome to the From Harm to Healing podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jones, and I'm a therapist who runs the From Harm to Healing treatment program, an online program for men who have engaged in infidelity or compulsive sexual behaviors within the context of an intimate relationship. I started this podcast to illuminate some of the common blind spots within the treatment fields for compulsive sexual behavior or sex addiction through the lens of the deceptive sexuality trauma model. I hope you find this resource enlightening, particularly if you're somebody navigating the pain of betrayal and deception for yourself. Thank you for listening to the From Harm to Healing podcast. In last week's episode, I posted the first half of a conversation I had with Trish Haight, who worked directly with Dr. Minwala at the Institute for Sexual Health and was a big part of the development of the DST model itself. And here in today's episode, I'm posting the second half of that conversation. What I often talk about, the language I use, is of safety. So stage 2, safety, stage 3, metabolization. So this idea that you can't metabolize trauma if you don't have a level of safety. You use that phrase, adequate safety. And so what I'm hearing here is you really developing those ideas more of what that actually means. So again, I think this is representative of my specialty, if you like, is working with the men. I'm really hearing the wisdom of your work with the women. So it leaves me with that fundamental question. It's easy to talk about safety, but where does safety actually come from? And there's this push-pull of partly external, and you talked about the harm that can occur, ongoing, that fractures the safety again. But you're talking about this embodied sense of safety. So I'd love to just hear more about getting to that in practice. What does that journey look like?
Yes. From somatic terminology, when trauma happens, what gets ignited is our sympathetic nervous system. And we go into a defensive orienting state, which would be more that cognitive intelligence, that to the point of global high intensity activation. And what that means is the nervous system stories are going up the body, and there's almost an out of body experience that can happen. And so I'm back to, and then the mind starts dragging the body around. What's key to create an embodied safety, or even a feeling of I'm safe in my world, is to help them move from defensive orienting, which is the hijack of the nervous system, into dropping into what we call, from somatic terminology, exploratory orienting, responding. And that's scary for most people in that fragmentation, especially a partner impacted in this way, moving from their sympathetic nervous system where they think, hey, this is how I stay safe, into, wait a minute, I have to slow that down and possibly release some of that so that I can come back to myself. The exploratory orienting, we want to create a safety which says these things. It's almost, I use an image of a cat lying in the grass with its head popped up in a high alert. So it's resting and alert at the same time. It's, I'm safe enough and I trust I can be alert if I truly need to be. Because what's happening is they come, right, if they're not safe, so they're in defensive orienting, they don't trust that if they let go of that alert system, they're going to be safe. And so it's a slow process. I often say, I use the analogy of move slowly, like you're moving through molasses. And what I mean by that, at first, when I first started saying that, I used to say, well, it's an invitation. Come with me towards the sweetness of truth. And then I kind of dug into the word molasses and I was like, wait a minute. Molasses has varying degrees of taste. There's bitterness, there's sweetness, and there's earthiness. And truth has those same tastes or elements. It's bitter when we tap into the truth. It's sweet when we tap into the truth. And there's an earthiness, a groundedness that starts to happen. So when I say move slowly, like you're moving through molasses, that's the way to safety, is really tapping into the truth. It's scary. I love what you brought up about you working with and I'm using gender specific right now because you said you worked with men who are often the abusers, who have caused harm, and how they often see their partners holding up that hard mirror reflection of the truth. And it's an activated truth, because it can be that charged truth, because they want to just really push it on them. See what's happening, see what's happening, see what's happening. And we, I just want to jump to holding the injured relationship a little bit here would be, how do we slow that down, even like moving through molasses, so that that hard mirror isn't just slamming up against that person, but there's a pause in between naming the truth, and they can land and metabolize there. I mean, I know I'm jumping to that injured relationship for a minute for a reason, because if I'm helping a partner move through the stages and I finally get her through metabolization, feeling safe enough to truly land in there I am, because she's clearing the space for her again, and then that organic rebound starts to happen, sometimes the person who harmed can come in and hit them again. And what can happen is a slam back into stage one. It's not the same kind of slam, but you have to help name it, right? From stage one, tame it, create safety and stabilize stage two, and get them back to metabolize what just happened so that they can arrive back into four. So the 5 stages are brilliant way to move through. It's a movement. It's like a wave that constantly moves, and which says this is transformation. This is how change happens. It's not easy. You bounce all over the place sometimes. Usually in this order, you get slammed to stage one to name something, stage 2 to tame it, stage 3 to metabolize it, stage 4 to rebound, to feel air again. The air is different. It's no longer toxic, right? So AIR, instead of the abused injured relationship, we change the air from toxic to clean. And that's when someone is going into that 5th stage, which is oxygen. That's what Omar names it to be, is oxygen. There's new air. There's an emancipated self inside. There is an expansion of self, all that beautiful spaciousness. There's energetic shifts inside the self. There is movement towards new meaning. Life becomes larger, and there's more sure-footedness as they enter. Again, it doesn't mean that something might not happen. It just means they'll have more resilience. Their window of tolerance is so much larger at that point because of the metabolization process and the capacity to embody. It's a lived experience. It's a new lived experience. Their lived experience when they enter the room with us is that fragmented lived experience. And then we take them into more of that there I am lived experience over and over again so that they can knit back together.
So as metabolization is gradually happening, as you're able to connect them with their self again, start doing that bottom-up work, the reality, as we've sadly said, is there will often be ruptures along the way, and will feel like going back to stage 1, stage 2. And at the start, that can feel like a fracturing all over again. It can feel like, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But I guess what you're saying there is, as we metabolize more and get that deeper work, the ability to recover from that, to be able to move forward, gets more sort of grounded, embodied each time.
Yes, beautiful. Each time there's more, the window of tolerance is larger, the resilient zones are larger, because you have turned towards something and tended to it with care and compassion and heart. You're turning towards yourself with all of those things, those beautiful qualities of healing. It invites even, and I hate saying it this way, you can become even more whole than you've ever been, by tending to the suffering and the wounds. Because you're doing it at a deep level, you're not just relying on the content to make sense of your world. You're relying on more that embodied inquiry. What is happening inside of me because of what happened? That would be Gabor Mate said, trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you because of what happened to you. I love that quote. I think that's embodied intelligence. That would be a window into that. And then more thriving can happen after you met and integrated the enormity of what's happened. Yeah.
And I love the idea as I think of this through the lens of the power balance that we talk about a lot in this model. So we really identify that the secret sexual basement is an abusive system, not just a hurtful system, but an abusive system. And one of the reasons is because there's a covert power imbalance going on. So the partner often doesn't know how disempowered she is. And then there's this huge fracture, the reality ego fragmentation I mentioned. And so a partner can feel so disempowered in that situation. And I talked earlier about the internal, external, like where does safety come from? And it makes sense that at the start, external boundaries, is the person that caused the harm following the treatment plan? Is there significant reduction in the harmful behaviors in the integrity abuse? But that thing you're talking about really finding that safety from within and finding the internal resources. Again, for those that listen to the episodes I did with Dr. Minwala recently, talked about with the connection with the self, the integrated self. If you don't have that, where do the resources for healing and moving forward come from? So it sounds like that's right at the heart of what you're doing, the piecing it back together, finding that embodied strength. That's where the energy ultimately comes from. External boundaries, very important, but internal connections where the healing can really happen.
I love how you're bringing in the covert phase of this model and all the erosion that has happened for the person impacted, and they don't even know it. Omar calls it the high octane, the secret sexual basement, and I often describe it like the fires are burning through the floorboards of their external and internal home, and they don't even know it. And so I think one thing that's really important about a partner impacted is they have been ripped from their soul and their heart. And when they hit this exposure phase, that disclosure, discovery, reality, ego fragmentation, acute relational rupture, attachment, injury. I mean, it's like boom, boom, boom. The sound of it is, I always say, like a crescendo going off, and they are ripped from their home. And I think one of the most important things is, again, a gentle guiding them back into their home through truth telling, through alleviating the dominance and control of a duplicitous life into one that says, transparency is part of my boundary. And if this is not the case, then we no longer have a relationship. That boundary is firm and strong, and helping them find their voice, that it's okay to have a strong voice at the base of them, especially after being ripped from their heart and soul. How do I bring them back into contact? It's almost like a soul retrieval of sorts. When you drop them into that deep space where they're reconnecting. I often see when I do work energetically or somatically with somebody, the sorrow is deep when they land there, because they feel the rip. They can see the rip almost. They can name it, describe it. It's that visceral for them. And to come back and tend to that wound is difficult, because they are now their altered self, because they're no longer connected to heart and soul in the same way. And so that gentle guiding them back to heal the heart and soul helps them come out of the altered self and into alignment. And we know that the altered self is part of post-traumatic stress symptoms because of the injuries that we're seeing, right? The injuries are the ones we're naming: reality, ego fragmentation, acute relational rupture, attachment, injury. I mean, there's so much altering happening that the invitation to come back to heart and soul, because of the covert and exposure phase, and then, mind you, the symptom progression phase, which is all the ripple effect of impacts, right? There are 22, Chris, that we often land in. You can't go through 22 in one day, and they're always popping. And so it's which one you're holding for that person in the moment. They're the ones to name which one is coming up for them, so that we meet them. We don't drag them into the room we think they need to be in. And so I think that's part of really helping them come back to their heart and soul, because they're actually informing us what their wound is.
And it's such a beautiful part of the work, again, hearing the way you share that. This idea of attending, not fixing. I'm usually talking about that in the context of the clients I work with. You cannot fix your partner's trauma, but you can attend and you can provide conditions where healing is possible and where the other person can be empowered. And you're really modeling that in the way you practice. You are not fixing anyone, nor are you going in with the belief that you can fix anyone, but you can provide the conditions where actually that human being's voice, they can voice what they need. They can find the way to use their voice that they might feel has been taken away from them. So you're actually modeling a lot of what I try and teach in the work that I do, or try and bring into the work that I do, which I really appreciate. And it can be hard sometimes because human nature, we want to fix. I'm seeing someone in pain in front of me. I want to be able to take that away. I think a lot of the guys I work with really wrestle with that as well. But what do I do? What do I say? And just slowing down, as you said, slowing down, two words that maybe particularly as men, we don't want to hear. We want to fix, we want to speed up, we want the solution. So it's just wonderful to hear you explaining how that really does come into the clinical work. It's not just an idea.
Beautiful. Yeah, that the place of not fixing and how humble we have to get, even though we might be noting inside from our cognitive intelligence when we're sitting with somebody, we can note, oh, they're in reality ego fragmentation. Oh, wait, they're tapping into mood disturbance or whatever. Wherever we're at, we can name. But the key is, again, what they're sharing with us from deep down inside is where we want to meet them. And like you named, slowing down and sitting with that moment could just be a silent moment, but you're with them. I remember sharing in a training, I had a session with somebody and it was a long session, but towards the middle of the session, it started to become a yeah session where it was just like the two of us going back and forth, nodding as you and I are right now. But it was more like yeah. Yeah. And it was such a deep river of healing where that person was coming into alignment with their heart and soul again. And I was really tuned into not jumping in and intruding on that process. And mind you, there are times you do have to jump in and help jar something from happening, especially if there's rumination or triggering. You want to be able to help them slow that down enough where they're not being carried out of the body again. You want to go away, you want to help them catch their breath in those moments, jar it a little bit. And not jump in too quick to regulate it because there's a reason they're being hijacked. For instance, like if I'm working with an injured relationship, let's say I'm going to say male, female gender right now. The male might say, she keeps saying this over and over again. And I might, well, there's a reason she's saying it over again. She's not feeling heard. Really, you're not sitting with her and deeply listening. And then I might work with them on how to truly do that, how to tune into that present state of being at their level. They're not going to be able to drop down and go, oh, now I'm so embodied and I can do this. We have to help the partner understand this takes some time. They've been living out of body. And therefore, their disintegrated self has now created a disintegrated self in the partner. And so we have to help them land to their degree and help the partner kind of land as well, knowing she's not going to be fully met. And that's a hard one to hold in the injured relationship. It doesn't mean she has to wait in her healing process. And that is scary for the person who caused harm, because as she begins to embody more and more and empower more and more, their sense of control and dominance lessens. It can't exist anymore in that space. It's a really important moment to help the injured relationship understand that, and that it's all part of the process of healing and transformation. And if they truly want a different relationship, then roll up your sleeves and do the work.
Sometimes think when new clients come into my practice, or if I have a consultation call, one of the first questions is often, how long does this take? And what I often interpret in that question is, how long before we get back to normal? And what I love in what you're saying there is, maybe normal wasn't good. Maybe normal wasn't healthy. Maybe we're not going back to normal. Maybe we're going to something new. And that's really uncomfortable. Something new, something different is really uncomfortable. That in itself is a huge part of the journey. As her voice potentially grows, how does that change the dynamic of the relationship? And can he step up to that plate where he can meet that and honor that, sit with that, respect that, all of those things?
Yeah. Even as you mentioned that, I'm just thinking of the model and how complex it is. The many layers that we hold, each entity doing work on their own. And just there's so much going on. Like, how do we slow down and help them not just check the box, but truly internalize the work that they're doing as imperative, to really let it sink in, because that's when true change is going to happen. That's going to be when they're less beholden to the old story and the old way of being, and that they might be more curious and open to what is our new story. As we get more ground underneath us, what is that? I always say I'm currently working on. So I'm working on something called the bridge of trustworthiness, where I actually build the bridge and all the parts of the bridge that actually the person who harmed is the one building the bridge, so that the intimate partner who is the victim can actually trust to step on that one plank. And what those planks are really important, and what the posts are really important. I mean, I'm a bridge builder right now, I guess. So it's taking a minute for me to kind of wrap my own mind around it in order to help. But it's just like there's so much work in creating a new story. And again, I go back to, you better roll up your sleeves and be ready for it. Because the partner, if she's choosing you, she also can choose to not be with you, and she needs to stand steady there, depending on how the person who harmed is showing up. Goes back, Chris, to that. Well, yeah, you had a one-up position for a long time because you had a covert phase, a secret sexual basement. And now there's a sense of humility and being humble and dropping down to your knees, in a sense, that says, I am taking full responsibility and accountability. And these are the actions I'm doing. It's not, I use the equation promise plus action equals commitment. Because if someone is just promising, it's just words. If their action is there, now they're building the bridge. Now it's a commitment. And when that's consistency over time, that creates a safe landing point for the injured relationship. We also have to develop that with each entity. I mean, think about the bridge of trustworthiness with the self. You look at the bridge of trustworthiness with the person who caused harm. They have to develop, go back to Omar, self-contact. They need a bridge of trust that it's okay to be in contact with their deepest self and not to split off from their self. Same goes with the person who was impacted. Now they're ripped from their soul and heart, as I said earlier. They need the bridge of trustworthiness that it's okay to come out of that hyper state and actually come into what I mentioned earlier, exploratory orienting, where they can land, I'm safe enough, and I trust me that if I need to be alert, I will be. It's that same thing I was mentioning earlier. That's their bridge of trustworthiness. I'm coming back to me. The work I do when I do intensives, in-person intensives, is the work I'm naming right now, is bringing them back into connection with themselves so deeply that they have moved through my intensives. They've moved through all 3 phases, which is all 22 rooms, in a certain way that they feel like, whoa, what did I just go through? I don't know, but I am transformed, because they're not so caught in the content. They're experiencing the lived experience of moving through the impact. And I'm just thinking about how much work they do in those intensives. What my intensives are called are Here I Am Becoming. And so that's kind of what I'm naming is, once we land in that safe place inside, and external and internal safety, that's when the becoming starts to happen. It's a beautiful unfolding.
Yeah. And again, it really honors the 3 plates we talk about, that it's not here I am becoming so I can heal the relationship. In the same way that Dr. Minwala, it's Be a Better Man program. It's not how to heal your relationship. It really honors that idea of the betrayed partner in your intensive The focus is on her connecting with herself. All of the things you've spoken about today, where there was fragmentation, rebuilding, reconnecting. And in the work I try and do when I'm working individually, I'm honoring that I am working with this individual in front of me for them to become somebody who's growing in integrity, intimacy, integration, these things. And then the third plate, how much more can the third plate heal the injured relationship if that kind of work is being done?
Yeah, if the two entities, the person who caused harm and the person who's been harmed, working in this model in the injured relationship, it's exponential, the healing that can happen. I mean, like any model, I'm not discounting any models, right? I'm always weaving the work that I do in everything, but I'm really pure with this model. It's just like when we land in one place in its purity and we keep it in that lane or that vein or river, you know, the people immerse into that. The language becomes their new story. They don't even have to explain themselves so much to each other, because people get caught into explanation of themselves too much. And then we derail from actually what we're trying to have a conversation about. So an injured relationship gets too much into, I'm right, you're right, I'm going to explain myself, I'm going to rationalize whatever the pieces are. But if we bring them into one note, like reality ego fragmentation, let's talk about that. Let's process that at a deep level on what happened to all parts of the system. So when I'm working in, I also work and create customized injured relationship intensives in person. So they'll come in for like 3 days to do the work. I will be working that space, whatever one we're landing on, whatever I've assessed and developed that treatment plan for that certain injured relationship. I will work with that piece and we see how it unfolds. But I will distill it down to that one note, which is so important. It's kind of what we started with, right? Was sitting with.
So simple. And I often find one of my most common phrases probably in my men's groups is simple but not easy. So I talk about self-contact, slowing down, WTF, which stands in this context for what am I thinking, what am I feeling? And then using the human voice to express that authentically, to share accurate, authentic reality, which is simple, right? Just slow down, connect with what I'm thinking and feeling, and share that using the voice. But there is so much profound depth in something that simple. There might be so many pieces in that equation that I've perhaps never developed, that I've never learned to be comfortable in self-contact. I've never learned to be curious about myself. I've never learned to use my human voice authentically. I've learned to wear a mask and be what people want me to be. So this sounds like another, that sitting with, simple, just sit with someone, just listen, just hear their story. But it's a profound, beautiful thing when it really happens. And it's about the conditions, the vibes, those immeasurable things that we talk about a lot that really make that powerful.
Yeah, even as you're talking about it, just with the rhythm of your voice, it reminds me of how tribal sitting with is. It's been with us for many, 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 many generations over time, where people would gather and sit with each other and put someone in the center so that they can be heard and understood and cared for, until they were complete. That's the metabolization, so that they can feel they've arrived in themselves. And that honoring, as we say, with dignity and care is an important part of someone's innate healing process.
Yeah. Idea of trauma not being fixed, but rather being witnessed. It needs an empathic witness. It needs the tribe to witness that. And the beautiful work you're doing is so early in this phrase, when everything is fragmented, safety is gone. We started this conversation by saying connection with the self might be fractured. The safety I might have felt with my intimate partner is fractured. That person was supposed to be the go-to person, was supposed to be the safety net. And one of the most important functions you can provide as a therapist, yes, there's all the information, there's all the clinical skill involved, but just being an initial safety net, just being someone that can be trusted to sit with them. From what I'm hearing of everything you're saying, that's the foundation of all of the work.
I mean, yeah, it is. And especially, all of us as treating professionals, right? We need to be doing our own work constantly and really clearing the space for the person who comes in the room, because if our stuff comes up in the room, we are not allowing them the true dignity they need. So we really need to get ourselves in check and make sure we're doing our own work. We carry so many stories. Like after each session, I often do a clearing. I do a breath to clear my system before I enter the next space, because I want to be completely present for that person. I want to be able to sit with them with my heart open, with my my sense of attunement is there for them, because they've been so misattuned. That's really an important part of sitting with somebody. We could go on and on, I'm sure, about what it actually is. There's so much going on in a therapist while they're sitting with. Again, we're assessing from a psychoeducation standpoint, a psychological standpoint. We need to, because we're caring for them, but we're also, this sitting with is very powerful, especially in that first stage. Well, actually, every stage. Even in 4 and 5, I would say a sitting with and watching them bloom is really exciting. It's exciting to see them excited.
Yeah, it's a profoundly honoring journey, and it's wonderful seeing that healing. And when someone is trusting you with that level of pain, that level of fragmentation, all of those things, it's a profoundly honoring journey to go on as the professional. But to your point, we're also challenged to have our own stuff in order to a degree. None of us are perfect. We're all on a journey. We're all growing in integrity, intimacy, integration. But when there are two human beings in the room and one can be fully present for the other, attending, not fixing, providing those healing conditions, it can be simple and it can be profoundly beautiful as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's exquisite. And it's a privilege, in a sense, to be able to hold someone sharing their story and all that's happening. The exquisiteness is, again, when they land in themselves and they feel held emotionally, energetically, in that safe, nurturing, inviting space that is non-shaming. And this model is that. It's non-shaming. It's gently bringing forward the invitation to speak truth. And that's truly what people want. They want to be able to do that and hear that.
Yeah, I've consistently heard people describe the model as, for the men I work with particularly, as very challenging. Some of the language it brings in, the way of framing things. But when people can truly hear it, I would agree, it is non-shaming. It is more about honoring a person by sharing the reality. If the therapeutic journey for the individual is moving from manipulated reality to authentic reality, then we got to start with the framework we're working with. So honest, authentic, non-shaming provides a great container to move forward from. And to what we were saying about the privilege, the honor of sitting with, for me, once again, it has been privileged to talk to you today. I feel like we've introduced all these ideas that each in themselves could be a whole episode. But it would be great. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I know we're going to swiftly run out. But it would be great to hear a little bit more. You briefly mentioned some of your programs. I'm sure there will be people who would love to hear about where they can find you, what maybe some of those options would be, how they can contact you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I offer many things, but not often, because I have a full practice. And so I want to honor my practice and the people I care for in that. And every now and then I do offer an in-person intensive where I have to put my practice on hold and create space for very intimate group settings for women impacted. And so those are in person. That's a 7+1 day. And what that means is 7 days in person, all in a row. It's an immersive, it's an intensive. It's meant to be that way. And then the 1 day is maybe 4 days after they arrive home. And there's a synthesis and planning day, which is like that catch-all day where we are reconnecting and remembering where you were, because they're not remembering so much. Remember, they're in a space of, I feel different and it feels so good. But then when you land back home, I want to be able to catch them and remind them of their self-contact, their embodied sense of self, etc. I at times offer a psychoeducation illumination process, which is 6 days total, which breaks out as 5 days plus 1. And that's the same kind of thing, 5 days in a row. 4 days later, we do a 1 day. And then I also offer individualized intensive for partners, and I offer them for the injured relationship. Again, depending on my schedule, depending on what I assess the person to need and where they're at in their process, I want to make sure there's stability enough to actually do that deeper work. Yeah, so I take 3 to 6 people for the intimate process in California.
You said about the psychoeducational process. Is that an online process?
Yes, that's a virtual process. Yes, a virtual process, psychoeducation illumination. Again, I'm not offering any more this year. I have an in-person coming up next week, it starts. And then I may offer another one in November 3rd, and that will be my last one of the year. So hopefully I have enough space for people.
Wonderful. And the best place for people to reach out to you?
Trish, Trish, at Trish Haight, TrishHaight.com. You can also find me on my website, www.trishhaight.com. And I'm on Instagram, which I have some really cool posts that I do. I don't post often, but you can see me at trish.haightmft.
Great. Thank you. And again, I can only add that it's been a privilege to know you, work with you, learn from you on this journey I've been on. To hear some more today about the long journey you've been on with this and all the work you've done there in the creation of the model itself, all the clients and all the work you've done. So I am very grateful to you for your time today coming on the podcast, and perhaps it would be wonderful to have you on again sometime as well.
You know, Chris, I have to say, I am completely thrilled that I did this, and you made it such a beautiful, sacred container, really showing up in the way, holding space, really interested and curious. And I love how we flow in our conversation. Like, we could go on, like you said, we could drill into any of these and probably drop in really deep, but I am grateful as well. So thank you. And I'm grateful for Omar really developing the model and allowing me to breathe life into it over and over again for many, many years. So, you know, and as I teach with him, I'm always learning from him, and I know he's learning from me because I do.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the From Harm to Healing podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about the deceptive sexuality trauma model itself, you can visit minwalamodel.com. If you're interested in the services that I offer, in particular the From Harm to Healing treatment program, please visit chrisjonestherapy.co.uk.